Hello, welcome to the Roundtable. We deal with major global issues from expert perspectives. Last week, we witnessed a lot of big events coming in from around the globe. We are joined by two experts who will share their insights and help us better understand the significance of the global issues. Here, we are joined by Professor Choi Hyun-jin. Welcome to the Roundtable.
Glad to join the Roundtable.
We are also joined by Professor Joo Hyo-yeon. Welcome.
Nice to see you.
Unpredictability is further growing in the Middle East as Israel struck back at Iran. Iran's foreign minister warned that Tehran will respond at an immediate and maximum level if Israel acts against its interest. Well, the Iranian leadership seems to be really determined to go all the way if there be another escalation tension or another conflict between the parties.
Always it's not easy to predict the future, but as you said, the statement from Iran is like this: in case Israel takes any further military action against the interests of Iran, the next response will be immediate and at a maximum level. And within this statement, there are two conditions. The first condition is there must be another Israeli military action, not the current one. Okay? And the second condition is they should be somehow make a threat to the interests of Iran, such as a nuclear facility or the key military base or oil producing facility within Iran. Okay? So if these two conditions are met, I think the Iran is unlikely to make another military action against Israel. And also, Iran has dismissed the Israeli military response as attack by tiny drones. Okay? And they were shot down by its air defense system. So this shows that Iran may be downplaying this Israeli attack. Okay? And so based on these two conditions, I expect that, and also I hope that these two countries are trying to wrap up the most this dangerous situation between the two countries.
Professor Joo, according to Professor Choi's analysis, that although Iran attacked Israel with drones, but those measures were consciously taken not to escalate the situation to regional warfare, direct confrontation between Israel and Iran. So I think this is a time for Israel to, respond in kind in order to prevent the situation from getting out of hand. Right. What are the variables that would lead to things getting out of hand? You mentioned the variable, which is the leadership of Netanyahu in Israel. Right. What other factors will push the situation into more dangerous scenarios?
Right. So there are the three factors to be considered. The first one is Israel's internal and external situation. Currently, Netanyahu, he faced criticism from international community and the nationwide anti-government protest due to the after effect of the prolonged war with Hamas, including the mistaken bombing of an international relief organization in Gaza Strip. So it is predicted that his political career might be ending soon. The second one is an effort provided by the major countries, including the United States. The Biden is highly likely to prepare for an active response system due to the burden of being evaluated for his ability to control the Middle East issues ahead of a presidential election. And lastly, the current situation of Iran. Iran is currently suffering from the Western the economic sanction, so it doesn't have any the capacity to wage war.
At least in the context of long-term conflict.
That's right.
It must be the huge relief for the Biden administration for U.S. Engagement in the region because the Congress has approved the massive economic aid to Israel despite the bipartisan contest. So if there will be, God forbid, a major conflict between Israel and Iran, that would be the fifth Middle Eastern crisis. How would you assess its probability?
The probability of another major war in the Middle East is hopefully is not high, I think.
That's good news.
Yeah. So when Iran and Israel are involved in the conflict, This also affects other neighboring countries in the region and also including the United States. This complex connection between multiple countries could make the situation more dangerous, but it also serves as a kind of safety measure that prevents a situation from further escalation. For example, Iran might want to restrain themselves in this situation because it's a new diplomatic relation with the neighboring countries. For example, there was Saudi Arabia and UAE. These two countries have been traditional rivals and even enemies of Iran. However, since last year, these three countries, Iran, Saudi, and UAE, has started building new friendship and try to fix their trouble based on some diplomatic support and brokerage by China. So if Iran goes to war against Israel in the Middle East, this new friendship between the three countries could be at risk as well. And therefore, based on this new diplomatic initiative by Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi, I expect that Iran is unlikely to escalate this conflict and make another war in the Middle East.
Iran and Israel engaged in a shadow war or proxy war since the Islamic Revolution took place in Iran in 1979. This was the first time that the two countries directly attacked each other. Professor Ju, why Israel took a risk?
In the case of Iran, it seems that the Russia's support was able to attack Israel directly with high confidence. So recently, the relationship between Russia and Iran gets closer than ever.
Professor, what do you think of this Russian factor behind the scene that Professor Ju mentioned? Then what are the strategic reasons for Russia to get so deeply involved in this situation?
So this Russian move toward Iran should be understood within the context of the bilateral strategic relationship between Iran and Russia. So this relationship is not one-sided. So both sides, Iran and Russia, stands to benefit from each other. For example, in 2022, Iran decided to send a lot of drones and missiles to help Russia fight a war in Ukraine. So Russia really needed this military stuff from Iran. And this move made the Iran-Russian relationship much stronger and led to promises from Russia to give Iran high-tech jet fighter and also defense system. They can help Iran as well in its war against Israel. So in addition, these two countries, Iran and Russia, are now working together to produce war-fighting drones to prepare possible war in the Middle East and also in Ukraine. So this shows a development in their bilateral military cooperation. And I think this alignment could make Iran a stronger military force, possibly change some military dynamics in the Middle East, and also while providing Russia with the much needed military assets in its war against Ukraine. So this is a part of this growing strategic partnership between Iran and Russia.
I mean, it is no secret that Washington and Tel Aviv have been very strong security partners in history, and Biden administration is no exception to this, right? It has provided massive economic and military assistance to Netanyahu government of Israel since Hamas attack in last October. But at the same time, Biden administration expressed a very strong concern about the civilian casualties of Palestinians since Israel's military operation began. And Biden administration also warned the Netanyahu government not to escalate the situation to get out of hand, including major conflict with Iran.
Yes, although this looks contradictory, but somehow it makes sense, in fact, because this Biden administration's military aid to Israel, and its goal is not to increase war-fighting capability of Israel or any kind of war in the Middle East. Its goal is to maintain the balance of power in the Middle East so that no country has a dominant position and dominant military power in the region. Major countries such as the United States and all other countries in the world want a peace and stability in the Middle East because this location is so important for free flow of energy. Do you know Strait of Hormuz, right? This is a narrow waterway between Oman and Iran. This waterway is super important for transporting oil because every year more than 20% of the global oil passes through this narrow waterway. And therefore, we call this location so-called a choke point.
Choke point. No wonder the oil price in the global market has spiked up since the exacerbation of the situation.
Right, you're right. So if oil can't get through this choke point, even for a short while, then there will be the huge increase in the global oil prices due to increasing shipping costs and delivery delays. And therefore, we need to protect and maintain the free flow of oil in this Strait of Hormuz. And that's why most of the major countries, including the US, want to maintain peace and stability in the Middle East.
So to summarize your points, that the United States only provides assistance to Israel for the sake of stabilizing the situation as early as possible. But if Israel going to try to take advantage of the American assistance for the sake of expansion of its influence, risking regional warfare, then United States directly opposes that, right?
It is true. The final goal is to maintain the balance of power.
Balance of power
in the Middle
region,
East.
right. The conflict in the Gaza Strip has evolved into a broad regional conflict since it began 6 months ago with the Hamas attack on Israel. It is clearly in everyone's interest to bring the situation under control and prevent the conflict from becoming a full-scale war. So everyone has interest in a quick stabilization of situation. Everyone looks at the same goal, but how come the goal has not been materialized? What is the effective way to bring the situation under control?
Right. So I think the first, the issue of Israel's attack on Iranian embassy should be clearly identified. However, the international community, including United Nations, is not properly addressing this issue. This might be due to the biased Middle East policy of the United States, which has the great international influence. So there is a strong need for international community to resolve this issue of conflict rate first and urge the countries involved to exercise restraint.
Professor Che?
I agree with Professor Chu in that international community is important, but personally, I think that the role of the United States alone is much more important than international community.
Right.
So I think now it's time to restrain Israel and also its Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And who can do this? I think this can be done by the United States. Okay. And we need to take some historical lesson of 1914 at the beginning of the First World War. So in July 1914, Austrian-Hungarian Empire declared war against Serbia. And how did they make this bold move? It was because of the strong military backing from Germany, right? Germany's strong signal to Austrian-Hungarian Empire emboldened this emperor to fight against Serbia, and it sparked the First World War. So I believe that the United States must not repeat this historical mistake. Okay. And luckily, the President Biden said that U.S. would oppose any kind of a war and would not join any war that is initiated by Israel. I think this is a good move.
I see. We have discussed the chaotic situation in the Middle East. Effective international efforts are needed more than ever in order to prevent the conflict from escalating into a regional war. Let's move on to the second topic. Defense information is rarely open to the public. As a result, it is extremely difficult for civilians like us to make accurate predictions about wars. But this can help gauge a conflict situation. Let's take a look at video clip first.
The threat of a wider war is looming in the Middle East. When volatility escalates in international politics, this is where the first reactions comes from. Pizza restaurants get busier? On April 13, pizza restaurants in the U.S. state of Virginia received floods of orders. Virginia is where the Pentagon, the headquarters of the United States Department of Defense, is located. Some 23,000 military and civilian employees work in the Pentagon. They are tasked with coordinating and supporting military operations involving U.S. forces deployed around the world. They have to stay on standby around the clock if international affairs get unstable. In a time like this, pizza houses near the Pentagon get busy too, because Pentagon workers on emergency mode order pizza for meals. On April 13, when Iran launched a missile strike on Israel, pizza restaurants near the Pentagon were busy again. A Google Maps image showed that pizza places near the Pentagon were busier than usual. This is the so-called pizza meter, which describe how the increase in pizza orders from the Pentagon can indicate important political or military events. The Pizza Meter was an annual report issued by Domino's Pizza in the 1990s, which observed Americans' political and individual attitudes through surveys of pizza delivery drivers. For example, the report said that a dropping number of customers answering the door without clothes on could indicate that America was growing more conservative. With the current ubiquity of smartphones, it is possible to collect data on users and make predictions in various fields. Flight Radar 24 is a flight tracking website that follows in real time the movements of planes. During Iran's latest attack on Israel, the website showed that no plane was passing between Iran and Israel, which looked as if a giant hole was formed in the Middle East. There are websites that track the real-time locations of aircraft carriers and predict risks of war. Observation and analysis of various numbers can indicate social changes. How can we predict about the Middle East conflict using these data?
It is interesting that ordinary citizens can collect information and data online and make predictions about international events. Have you heard of the term pizza meter?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
There are many stories about this pizza matter. For example, before the United States invaded Panama in December 1989, the pizza deliveries to the Pentagon went way up.
I see.
And also, when the U.S. started a first Iraq war in January 1991, newspaper told an interesting story about the pizza shop owner. He told that a military operation was about to happen because he was selling a lot more pizza than usual. Okay.
What do you think? Can it be meaningful analysis in social science and policy making?
Frankly, I don't really trust its forecasting power, but at least I think that it can serve as a playful reference.
Professor Chu, but the merit of these interesting terms like pizza meters is that data analysis can be made not only by experts like us, but common people.
That's right.
So are there any data analysis tools that are available to non-academics?
Yes, a representative example of this, the tracking economic impact based on opening and closing of retail stores is Waffle House Index.
Waffle House Index.
Yes. Waffle House is a southern U.S. restaurant chain known for 24-hour and 365-day service. Since this restaurant remains always open, except very serious disaster situation, it has given to rise an informal but very useful metric to determine the severity of a storm and the likely scale of assistance required for disaster recovery.
I see. It is a popular practice for experts to use numerical analysis and thereby predict how international and political affairs will unfold. As for the security situation in the Middle East we discussed, oil prices have been widely regarded as an indicator for regional stability and instability. Oil prices are very sensitive to political developments in the Middle East. Whenever the risk of a war increases in the region, oil prices fluctuate. Professor, you mentioned the importance of the the region for the oil trade for the global economy. Could you tell us more about the current situation, especially after the engagement of the hostile actions between Israel and Iran?
Yes, oil prices indeed fluctuated during the current situation. So just before Iran launched an attack against Israel, the price of oil had jumped to the highest in 6 months. So this was because many experts in the region believed that the Iranian retaliation was imminent. And the situation was uncertain. They didn't know what was going to happen after Iranian retaliation. But interestingly enough, after Iran actually hit Israel, oil prices went down. Right? So Iran sent the early warning to Israel and its friends before each military strike. So this led some experts to think that both Iran and Israel don't want a full-scale war, and the risk of further escalation is not high enough. I think that's why the oil price actually went down after Iran hit Israel.
I see.
In addition to oil prices, the people's psychological perception prefers safer assets due to the concern about war. So we can currently observe that the price of gold and the price of U.S. Treasury bond,
Those safe assets. Right?
yes, it's considered as the safest asset, have risen sharply. Moreover, the dollar price has become the more expensive, while the major index of the stock market indices continue to decline.
Professor, the world economy just got barely out of the destruction during the 3-year-long COVID-19 pandemics. But when you think of the rise in oil price and gold price, as well as the change in the yields of the U.S. government bonds, do you expect some gloomy days for the global economy in the future because of the crisis in the Middle East?
Yes, based on these indices. So for example, if oil prices go up, then it generally increases the cost of gasoline and also heating, and which can reduce consumer spending on other goods and services due to higher transportation and production costs. And also rising gold prices indicates that investors are worried about the economy and also inflation. And therefore, this leads to reduced investment in higher risk assets. And there's another indicator, a lower U.S. Treasury yield tends to indicate that the global economy is not doing well. And if the global economy is in a poor shape, what would happen to Korean trade? Usually in this situation, the Korean exports tend to decrease. And as exports decrease, the dollars coming to South Korea also decreases. So in this situation, our exchange rate tends to rise. Right? So based on these kinds of indices, we can somehow prepare for the gloomy economic future.
This is fascinating because you only need to look at one indicator to make huge prediction about so many things. Are there any other economic or security indexes that we need to know to get ourselves educated?
I would like to recommend a lipstick effect. The lipstick effect is economic term that appears during the Great Depression. This was also originating from people's psychology that as economy gets more difficult, the people look for ways to satisfy their luxury needs at a relatively lower cost. In fact, a cosmetic company in the US presented this lipstick index by showing a negative correlation between its lipstick sales and the economy situation.
Is there any other index you would like to recommend to our viewers to be educated?
I want to talk about the coffee.
Great.
the index-related coffee. So many people, enjoy coffee nowadays, right? Coffee is a useful item to compare consumer prices and also predict the economic situation. One of such example is so-called a Starbucks index. Some people call it Latte Index.
Latte Index.
The logic is simple. It takes the price of the small latte in different countries and converts it into US dollar, we can figure out if a country's money is too expensive or too cheap compared to US dollar. So if the latte costs more, that means the country's money might be too expensive. And if it is less, their money might be undervalued. Or we can simply compare the cost of living in multiple countries using this Latte Index.
I see. Very interesting. Very interesting. Today we have talked about the Middle East crisis, one of the most serious international issues these days. It is a critical question how the global community will overcome the crisis and stabilize global security and economy. Professor, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now we have to wrap up the program. We'll be back with more up-to-date issues and expert analysis. Thanks for watching and see you next week.